We are live.
Oh, hey. I didn't realize we were doing that too. But it's working this time.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, great. Then let's have a conversation. Good morning, Jess.
Good morning.
So, yeah, you're Jess DuBose.
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. Um, well, so I'm Allison Colberg again with a non-crackly audio, a non-crackly audio. Um, I'm an organizer in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with the Micah Center, and I'm very excited to be talking with Jess this morning about her book. Um, and Jess, you are a breakup to breakthrough coach, the owner of Coaching with Jess, your business, and now author of a new book to be published at the end of June
Yes.
called I Don't Hate My Ex-Husband. So give us the elevator pitch for your book.
So, I Don't Hate My Ex-Husband is a story that I wrote for myself to begin with, but it's like this epic love story with my ex-husband and I, and then the process of me going through the grieving after our divorce, and then the journey to learning to love myself.
Gotcha. Um, so finish this sentence for me. Um, Before my divorce, Jess DuBose was.
Naive.
Say more about that.
Well, it was the first word that popped into my head, but before I was married, I didn't really know much about myself as much as I thought I did. There's a lot that I still didn't know, and quite honestly, there's probably still a lot I don't know, but um, so much so that there was a lot of stuff I didn't understand about my family and how they played into the programming of who I was, and um, the 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 differences that different people like really grow up with. So like, I was in this little bubble of the people in my world and didn't realize how much more different there is out there. And so, um, yeah, I say naive because there's just a lot that I didn't know.
Hmm. Okay. So you knew early on, right? And you mentioned this in your book that you wanted to get married. You definitely knew that. So, what did you think marriage was? What did you expect from it?
I write some of this in my book, but it's almost like I wouldn't have consciously thought that this at the time, but basically what I thought marriage was is like these two people like merging together into oneness and like becoming a blob of two people that's not really two people anymore, and you get to do everything together, and all parts of you are intermingled, and you do it like basically everything together, and you become this conglomerate one.
So, what would a day in the life of Jess and her spouse, in what you expected, have looked like?
It's such a great question. It would have been like waking up with kisses and warm hugs and making breakfast together and laughing and um, driving off to work together. Um, then after work, getting to be picked up and go to the store together, like happily making food, maybe having some people over, going to someone's house and playing some games, like watching a movie, and um, like just this like happy, everything is delightful and amazing, and we do everything together in the same way and don't argue about it.
So you expected to spend a lot of time together. You expected a lot of happiness. You expected a melding into single personhood, it sounds like. Why did you want that so badly?
I wanted, at the time, I wanted it because it's what I had always dreamed of. And there was a bit of lacking too. Like, my parents got divorced when I was 12. Um, and both of them remarried when I was 15. But there was just this weird, like, the way marriage should look like to me was not emulated in my immediate family life. Um, and so I wanted to change that. And I think there was almost this element of proving that it could be the way that I thought it would be. But as looking back on it, I think a lot of the reason I wanted that so much too is because um, I didn't love myself. And so it was a way to have love in my life all the time.
Why didn't you love yourself?
Hmm. There's so many layers to that question. So there's the programming of society. As a woman growing up in the 90s, where stick figure bodies were idled. That is not the type of body I had. So I didn't like myself in that way. Watched my mom yo-yo diet because she didn't like her body. So it was, passed down to me not to like my body and it needing to look a certain way. So there was the element of not liking my body. And then there was this element of imperfection that I had in my life. And so if I wasn't perfect, then that meant I was bad. Um, and then I had a lot of judgment around that. And I honestly don't know where that came from. I think a lot of that was myself. It was a coping mechanism to make things good because I felt like if I was perfect and I got really good grades and did all the right things, that everyone else would be happy around me. So in a world where there was a lot of fighting and arguing and tumultuous conversations because my parents were um, not getting along, it was a way for me to bring some stability and goodness. And so when you have this really high standard of what perfection should look like, anything less than that means you're bad. Um, and so I didn't like myself because I constantly was trying to reach these unrealistic expectations of myself.
Did anybody else tell you that when you performed a certain way, you were good and worthy, and when you didn't perform a certain way, you weren't?
Sort of, but not really. Because I got really good grades my whole life, like I would get teased for getting an A minus. But they meant it in fun because there's like, well, of course Jess got an A. Like, of course Jessica got an A. So they were meaning it in fun, but I took it very differently. And I'm like, oh man, I didn't get the full A or an A plus. Like, I'm still not reaching that good enough space. Um, so I think I was just, always looking for that outside appreciation and affirmation too.
Hmm. So you talk a little bit in your book about, well, not a little bit, a significant amount about being right versus being wrong, about competition and winning and needing to win. Um, and I wonder if you could tell us a story. You talked a little bit just now about where that some of that comes from. Um, but tell us a story about what that looked like in your marriage to Morris.
About right and wrong and competition.
Yeah.
Uh, what it looked like to Morris. Well,
Well, what it looked like in your marriage.
mm, yeah, there's a lot of stories around this, but um, one in particular is like, so I both of us are really competitive when it comes to games, and so we actually played games pretty often. And all bets are off when there's a game playing. Like you're not married anymore; you're just playing the game, which is a lot of fun. But outside of playing games, I was also really competitive, and there was a lot of comparison happening. And so my degree is in music education, and Morris also grew up in a family with lots of musical talent. And when we were at a church, I started joining the worship team, and I know how much Morris loves music and how much I loved, that togetherness and doing things together, and thought it would be really great for us to do that together. So I asked, kept asking Morris to join the worship team with me because I know he would significantly add to it. And then all of a sudden, I felt like he was taking it over. He was asked to lead the vocalists. He has a really good ear and is amazing with vocal talent. And so he was asked to take that over. And I felt slighted because, I'm the one with the degree in music education and Morris isn't. And why does he get to do that and I don't? On one level. And then on another level, now I have my husband who is perceived as this person above me telling me what to do and how to do it. And I didn't like that either. But then
What,
also,
okay, dig into that a little bit.
ah, um, more like he was giving me constructive criticism to make me a better singer. But I thrived on affirmation and like congratulations and adoration, and having someone that I love so dearly tell me that I was wrong or bad or needed to fix something was devastating. It felt like rejection and yeah, just like I was bad and not good enough again. And so the story that I kept telling to myself was reinforced in those moments with him. And so while he was in this space of, creating this beautiful blend of voices and wanting to give me some constructive criticism to help me become a better singer, I was like, nope, this is not okay. I'm like crying all like so many times, crying when we got home, and frustrated because I felt like he was picking on me and whatever the case. So I ended up quitting the worship team because I couldn't handle that situation.
Wow. You said, striking to me that you said, and I was wrong or bad again. What does that mean?
Well, you know, that's the story was telling myself. I was bad for not doing this. I didn't do this perfectly, so it was wrong or bad. That's the story I was telling myself. Then, other people would reinforce that with grades that were less than 100% or constructive criticism. Being in music education, like that's part of it. Like we had a class where my classmates and I would perform in front of each other, and the whole point was to give each other constructive criticism every Friday. Like that was, and there's that part of it is like supposed to encourage you to become a better musician, to have people who are, but if you are a person like me who like thrives, is like a affirmation junkie, um, like then it is devastating when you hear anything other than affirmation, because I'm already have the internal dialogue of not being good enough.
Mm. Do you think Morris was picking on you?
I have no idea. I probably not. I also know that as much as I love to sing, and I have some talent in music, my oral skills, my hearing, especially when it comes to myself singing, are not good. Like that's something I would need to practice a lot. And so I think Morris probably probably was restraining himself for how much he wanted to give me constructive criticism, because I'm not always in tune singing, because I can't hear it.
Mm-hmm. And was there any way that he could have said that to you that wouldn't have felt to you like a takedown or a rejection at that point in your life?
Oh, possibly, but probably not.
Mm-hmm. Um, so that's a great example of the right and wrong, the gotta win, gotta be perfect dynamic that you talk about in your book that was inside of you and then brought itself up inside of your marriage. Um, so, how did that affect your marriage, that dynamic, as you continued outside of that particular instance?
Well, what I was teaching Morris how to treat me is that he has to walk on eggshells around me. He can't tell me things that are wrong or hard, or even how I was being hurtful to him. That's what I taught him in those moments. And so increasingly, there became more and more distance between us, and I could feel that and didn't understand why it was happening at all. So
Mm.
then, when I'm specifically asking him to be like, tell me how I upset you, um, he wouldn't, because he was afraid of what might happen with myself, because I was seemingly fragile. And even though I had grown and was had learned a little bit more about emotional intelligence in myself, and understood that the feelings I would have around it would be temporary, um, it was still really hard to get that information from him. So then, I wouldn't understand the things that I was doing wrong, not wrong, but like things that would be painful to Morris, or hurtful, or, you know, and then he would continue to get hurt because I didn't know the things I was doing that was hurting him.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So, what was what would be like the story that you would tell yourself inside of your head? Like, what was the dialogue inside of Jess's head when there would be a difference like that? Like in that choir story, for example, what was the conversation in your head? Like, if we could jump inside, take us on that narrative of like, Morris just gave you a critique at choir again. What's the conversation in your head?
Why is he picking on me? Why is he giving all these compliments and affirmations to everyone else but me? Um, or why does he seem to be ignoring me? Um, I can't believe he's the one in charge, and I'm the one with the flippin' degree, and it's hard for me to go back there because I just don't think about it anymore. But those are some of the thoughts that I think I was having at the time.
Mm-hmm. Did you generally think that Morris was wrong or at fault when there was conflict in your marriage?
Oh, for sure.
I mean, and you've got some great stories in your book about that and how you see those things now. Um, was there a point that you started to think, maybe it isn't just Morris doing things wrong, and where you started to reflect on you at all?
Oh, for sure. Not only did I think Morris was wrong, I would beat myself up all the time. Like the other internal dialogue is like, oh my gosh, maybe it is me. Maybe I'm so bad and I'm doing all these things wrong. And I can't believe I did that again. And like there, so not only would I like villainize Morris, I would villainize myself and beat myself up even more than what was already, what I perceived was already given to me.
And what effect did that have on you and your relationship?
Well, it's incredibly hard to love a person who doesn't love themselves. And so I didn't love myself. And Morris loved me so much and I didn't even know it. I really didn't. And so because I couldn't receive my own love, like I was not really able to receive other people's love. Um, and so constantly, it's almost like I had the shields up. Like anytime you would throw love at me, I would just be like, nope, nope, nope. And then, so anything that he was trying to give to me, I wouldn't really receive.
Why not?
I wasn't worthy of it,
Mm-hmm.
is what I thought.
Mm-hmm. So your marriage lasted, how long was your marriage with Morris?
We were married 3.5 years and together for 5.
Mm-hmm. What's one word that you would describe your marriage with? One word you'd use to describe it?
Learning.
Mm-hmm. And so at some point, you decided that you were going to go to Korea, South Korea, and teach English. And Morris and you decided he didn't want to go, and you both decided that was fine, and you were going to go on your own, and that was just something you were excited about and wanted to do. And what as you parted ways and went to Korea to pursue this adventure, what did your marriage feel like at that point?
I felt really supported. Um, it was incredible that Morris wanted to see me be able to accomplish one of the dreams that I had. And it was only a year apart. We had done the long distance thing when we were dating. So um, it didn't feel like it would be that. It wouldn't, we'd done the long distance thing before. So it wasn't like that big of a deal. Yes, of course it would be hard. Yes, of course there would be a lot of things to consider and all of that. But um, it felt like we were in a good space and I felt really supported.
And so it was while you were in Korea, right, that um, that Morris ended up telling you that he wanted a divorce.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Going off to Korea brought up all of the things in our marriage that were not great to the surface. And so even though it felt like we were doing really well, the distance like brought all those things to the surface. And so while Morris has no concept of time, it was really painful to me to go 2 weeks without hearing anything from him. And so I would consistently feel not cared for, not thought of, not like rejected, like I had these expectations of like, we're married, so we get to have conversation every day or every other day at least. Um, and I particularly took this one job because of like there's such a huge time difference between Korea and the United States. And so I had picked a job that was in the afternoon to help with that so that I had space and time that was easy for us to be able to communicate. And I just wasn't hearing anything from him. And so a person like me who didn't love myself and needed that constant affirmation and love from somebody else and then wasn't receiving it, it was really hard and really painful. And I think Morris, um, was by himself for the first time in a few years and remembered the beauty there was in that and the freedom that he had, that I wasn't around all the time to like nitpick him or tell him what needs to happen, or just even the emotional stuff that came with me being around all the time. And so while he wasn't not thinking about me, he was just throwing himself into his work and all the things that he had wanted to do.
Mm. Hmm. Tell us about the moment that Morris told you he wanted a divorce. What happened for you in that moment?
Uh, hmm. Like all of the emotions at the same time, right? So there's sadness and anger and fear, but there was also relief and some joy, and because it had been, and it wasn't a surprise either. Like we had been in conversations for a few months around these things. I flew back to the States to try to save my marriage, and um, when I went, it wasn't a good trip. It felt very like I had been physically distant halfway across the world, and even being in the same room with him again, it didn't feel like we were any closer. Um, so it wasn't surprising. Um, and I think I tend to be a person who grieves things before they end. So I had done a little bit of grieving, kind of knowing that it was coming to that space. So even though it was hard and devastating, it was less devastating than the months prior, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about in your book, you describe deep grief. What were you grieving?
So many things, that the ending of our relationship, but that's not just the end, like it's what everything our relationship could have been, all of the dreams that we had together, or even the dreams I had myself for us together that maybe I didn't even share. um, the idea of what a future would be like, um, the at different moments, like the sense of like failure, um, like this relationship didn't work and now it's gone. um and Morris himself, like, Morris is an amazing person, and knowing that our relationship was about to change tremendously, that's really sad as well. So it's just a lot of things all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. What were you afraid of?
Being alone, um growing up in the church, there's a lot of programming involved around divorce not being an option. And for me, particularly, I didn't want it to be an option because I was a child of divorce, and saw how horrible that was. And so I didn't want that at all, and felt like it was, wrong to a certain extent to get divorced. But on the other hand, that freedom and relief that I was experiencing at the same time was like, I refuse to live myself live my life miserably, or allow somebody that I'm married to live his life miserably just because of some stupid rule.
So people do sometimes see breakups or divorces as shameful, or like there's something wrong with you or something wrong with the other person, whether you're married and it's a divorce or it's a breakup and you're not married. Um, is that true? Is there something wrong with you or Morris?
No, not at all. um I started this conversation with you talking about how this is an epic love story, and that's still true. The relationship between Morris and I was an epic love story that ended. Um, and it hasn't completely ended, it's just changed into a different type of relationship. But it's also still just that, an epic love story that I got to be part of. And um, there's beauty in all of it. Like, and it doesn't make me wrong or bad that it ended. It just means that, that was part of my life, a season of my life. And it was perfect the way that it was, even with all of the emotions that came with it. Um, that is part of life. Like, to really live life, you get to experience the array of emotions, like the deep, deep grieving and sadness, and the really high, amazing joys. And you can't really feel that amazing high joy aliveness without the deep sorrow either. You get to experience both. That's part of being human. And so I've been through many breakups, and I don't regret a single one of them. They were all there for different reasons in my life, and I've learned from each one of them. And I got to experience amazing things with each person. And um, that's just part of my story and making up of who I am today.
So, along that same line, you talk about being a breakup to breakthrough coach. So, what, I mean, and you in your book, you talk about grief, you talk about anger, you talk about struggling with yourself and who you are, and struggling with Morris and who he is, and some deep, some dark places and intense pain and emotions. And so it seems like you could have stayed there. You could have stayed in a dark place. You could have chosen to blame yourself or Morris and continue to tell that story. What happened that made your breakup a breakthrough?
Well, there's a lot of things. Um, there are some important books that I have read that contributed um, to my personal development. Um, Anything ever written by Brene Brown um, is I think I was reading Daring Greatly around the time. Nope, not Daring Greatly. The one after that, something about the wilderness. Um, that so I was reading one of her books when we were in the middle of right before our divorce. Um, that contributed a lot. Um,
What did that
and
contribute?
learning about myself, and then the way that emotions actually work. So I had always had this sense of like vulnerability is really important. Um, and Brene Brown has done all of this research on vulnerability and shame and belonging. Um, and a lot of the things that I had thought around that were like affirmed in what she was researching and finding. And so I think that I've almost kind of felt like a bit of an alien in my family because I had known these things, but I'd never seen them anywhere. And so to be like, to understand that somebody has done research on this and like the things that she shared are actually like, yes, vulnerability isn't being weak. Actually, there's so much strength in being vulnerable, and there's importance of that in intimate relationships with people. Um, so learning that, being able to read it and understand it in a different way for myself contributed to my personal development. And then I also, right after I got divorced, I got a counselor slash coach who would hold space with me and help me grow and learn to love myself over the next year. I invested in myself by going to counseling and coaching.
What made you decide to engage in that, in investing in yourself and in learning and exploring new ideas instead of sticking with?
It's actually something I had been wanting to do, but I had been telling myself this story that I couldn't afford it. And so while Morris and I were married, um, toward the end of our marriage, it was like we both couldn't go to counseling. And so I was like, well, Morris needs it more than I do. So we paid for Morris to go to counseling. But then after we separated, I was no longer fiscally responsible for him. And I was like, no, I absolutely need to do this. So I did.
So, can other people have breakthroughs like yours?
Absolutely.
What's the secret?
The willingness to um, actually like go there with yourself, to really invest in yourself. Like coaching, coaching saved my life. Like I, by choosing to invest in myself, like we spend money on all sorts of dumb shit all the time. And so I don't actually drink coffee, but I could spend money on Starbucks every day, or I could actually like invest in my personal development to help me better understand emotional intelligence and how I work, and how to learn to love myself, how to create boundaries in my life. What do I actually want? Learning what wanting is like is so important, and everyone has access to being able to do that. And generally, like you can read books, there's lots of podcasts, there's lots of everything, but the really secret part of that was to have somebody in my face, like holding up a mirror showing me my blind spots, because you can't do that for yourself. So really having a person in my life that was able to do that was like the secret sauce.
Mm. And it sounds like you had come to a point where you were ready for that and you wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, what was the hardest part of writing this book?
The hardest part about writing this book was knowing that Morris was going to read it. Um, I was more scared for him to read it than anyone else, to be completely honest. And that's, some of that is still the old stories of comparative and competitiveness, right? Morris is a writer. Morris has written a book already. That was one of the things that happened while we were married. Um, and he is this beautiful artist of words. The way that he puts words together is so amazing and beautiful, and there's like an art around it, and even how he speaks, not only how he speaks but how he writes it. He's just very just amazing at putting words together, and I don't feel like I am the same, but without that comparison I am still a writer as well, and that's something that I write about in my book. Actually, it's part of the discovery of writing this book is that I'm actually a writer. And the more that I come to that understanding, it's like, oh, wow, I really love writing and I am a writer. So like, yeah, just the hardest part was knowing that he was going to be reading it.
What were you what are you most excited about with this book?
On a personal level, like having published a book is like a huge accomplishment. It's one like so many people say I'm gonna write a book, but it's one thing to say something and then an entirely different thing to actually have done it. And so I'm super excited for myself to have done that. I'm excited for it to like finally be published and but then I'm also like really excited about what might come of it as like the conversations that people might have as a result of reading it, the interactions that people might have with their partners or themselves or whatever as a result of reading my book. I think that is really exciting.
Who do you most hope would find this book?
People who are tired of the same conversation of when you get to a breakup, you just bash your ex and they become this villain and they are this terrible person. Um, I actually know so many people who are friends with exes. And so, like, it doesn't have to be this devastating, awful, terrible thing that is like the epitome of your life by going through a breakup. Um, and so, people who are ready for a new conversation around that, I hope they find my book.
Is there anything that you want to say to watchers before we do our last question?
The things that I wished I could have heard is that you are not alone. I see you. I know that these things can be really, really painful. And I just want you to know that you're not alone and that you are loved.
That's kind of when I was thinking about the essence of your book and the essence of what I would hope people could hear from you is that there is love and freedom for you. There is love and freedom for you. Well, Jess, thank you for taking the time to talk today. What's next for you? You've written a book, you've started a business. What's next?
I get to publish the book. That has not been finalized yet, so that's definitely next. And I get to build my business and really engage with people in their journeys of learning to love themselves and discovering what they want and really calling them into the highest versions of themselves, because the playing small, like, that doesn't do anyone any favors. And so stepping into your power, stepping into your greatness, like really calling you forward into the highest version of yourself is amazing for you and then everyone around you. The ripple effect that happens as a result of that is so beautiful. And so that is what I want to do. That's where my heart is. I get to do that every day with my personal clients, and then I'm part of this other program where I'm coaching coaches as well. And so I'm coaching coaches who are coaching other people who are calling them into their highest versions of themselves. And that's just the fact that I get to do that every day is amazing. I yeah, I get to live that life, and it's gonna take, I have no idea where it's going to take me, and I'm really excited about it.
I'm excited for you too. Well, I would invite anybody who's watching to join Jess on this journey. Join the journey of coming into your fullest self. And at the end of June, when it's published, keep an eye on Jess's page and get ready to purchase your copy of I Don't Hate My Ex-Husband. Well, Jess, thank you very much again for taking the time. It was great to talk with you.
You
And
too.
and I look forward to talking with you again, not on a Facebook Live, soon, very soon.
Thank you so much, Allison.